Amelia should have known from the start that she was walking into a trap. The moment she stepped into the Whitmore estate, an uneasy chill wrapped around her like a warning. It wasn't the grand marble floors or the towering chandeliers that sent shivers down her spine. It was the eyes watching her, sharp and assessing, waiting for her to make a misstep. She had been dating Theo Whitmore for nearly a year now, but this was the first time she was meeting his family. A part of her had wanted to believe that his parents would welcome her with open arms, but deep down she knew better. People like the Whitmores didn't welcome outsiders, and Amelia was the definition of an outsider, ambitious, self-made, and from a background that didn't fit their elite standards. The grand double doors of the estate opened soundlessly, and there she was, Cecilia Whitmore. Regal. Imposing. Perfectly put together in a cream-colored suit that looked like it had been tailored just for this occasion. Her diamond earrings caught the light as she studied Amelia with an expression so polite it felt almost cruel. "You must be Amelia." Her voice was like silk stretched over steel. Amelia straightened her posture, forcing herself to meet those piercing eyes. "Yes, Mrs. Whitmore, it's lovely to finally meet you." She extended her hand, hoping to bridge the gap with a simple gesture of goodwill. Cecilia didn't take it. Instead, she let her gaze drift over Amelia's outfit, a vintage navy dress, elegant yet understated. A slow, almost imperceptible smirk curled the edges of her lips. "How quaint." Theo, standing beside Amelia, tensed. "Mum, be nice." "Oh, I'm always nice, darling," Cecilia said smoothly, stepping aside. "Come in. Your father is waiting." Amelia barely had time to absorb the lavish decor of the grand Whitmore estate before she was ushered into the living room, where Theodore Whitmore Sr. sat in a grand leather chair, swirling a glass of whiskey. His presence dominated the room. Unlike Cecilia, whose coldness was laced with faux politeness, Mr. Whitmore's scrutiny was blunt. He didn't bother hiding it. "So you're the one." His voice was low, almost amused, as if he found the situation entertaining. Amelia hesitated. "I suppose so." He took a slow sip of his drink, his gaze never leaving her. "Tell me, Amelia, what exactly do you see in my son?" It wasn't curiosity. It was a test. An accusation. The implication was clear. He wanted to hear the wrong answer. "I love him," Amelia said firmly. Cecilia let out a soft chuckle, setting her glass down with practiced elegance. "Love?" she mused. "It's such a fragile thing, don't you think? So often mistaken for ambition." Theo's jaw tightened. "Mum, Dad, enough." But they weren't finished. They were circling her like vultures, searching for a weakness, waiting for the moment she slipped. "You must understand," Cecilia continued, her tone syrupy sweet. "Theo has always been sentimental. It's easy for him to get caught up in things. And we just want to make sure his heart is in the right place." Amelia's hands clenched into fists. "I've never wanted Theo for his money," she said, her voice steady. "I want him for who he is." Mr. Whitmore exhaled, a smirk playing on his lips. "Ah, but do you even know who he is?" A tense silence settled over the room. Amelia turned to Theo, searching his face for answers, but before he could speak, Cecilia leaned in, her voice a whisper. "My dear, every woman who's ever walked through these doors thinking she was special has walked out in tears." She smiled, but her eyes were razor-sharp. "Tell me, what makes you think you're any different?" A chill ran down Amelia's spine. She had always known Theo's family didn't approve of her. What she didn't know, what she was about to find out, was just how far they were willing to go to tear them apart. As dinner was served, Amelia found herself seated directly across from Cecilia, with Theo to her left and his father to her right. The grand dining hall was illuminated by an ornate chandelier, its golden glow failing to warm the icy atmosphere surrounding her. Servants moved silently, placing dishes of exquisitely plated food before them, but Amelia had lost her appetite the moment she walked into this house. "So, Amelia," Cecilia started, her voice dripping with artificial interest, "tell us about your family. What do your parents do?" Amelia swallowed, suddenly aware that every pair of eyes at the table was locked onto her. She had never been ashamed of where she came from, but sitting in the Whitmore estate with its towering ceilings and priceless artwork, she couldn't ignore the vast difference between their worlds. "My father owns a small antique shop," she said, keeping her tone neutral. "And my mother was a teacher before she retired." Cecilia raised an eyebrow, exchanging a glance with her husband. "How charming," she said, sipping her wine. "So you weren't exactly raised in this kind of environment." Amelia's grip on her fork tightened. "No, I wasn't. But I worked hard for everything I have." "Of course you did," Mr. Whitmore murmured, a knowing smirk tugging at his lips. Theo set his fork down with an audible clink. "Can we not do this?" he asked, his voice edged with frustration. "Amelia doesn't need to prove anything to you." "Oh, but we just want to get to know her, darling," Cecilia said innocently. "After all, if she's going to be part of the family, we should understand what kind of background she comes from." Amelia met her gaze head-on. "My background doesn't define me. My actions do." A flicker of something, maybe amusement, maybe disdain, crossed Cecilia's face. She lifted her wine glass, her lips curving into a smile. "Well then, let's toast to that." Glasses clinked, but the moment felt anything but celebratory. Amelia knew this was just the beginning. The Whitmores weren't done with her yet. And something told her before this was over she would regret ever stepping into this house. Amelia couldn't shake the unease that had settled deep in her bones after that dinner at the Whitmore estate. The way Cecilia had studied her like a specimen under a microscope, the way Mr. Whitmore smirked as though he already knew how this story would end, it all left a bitter taste in her mouth. Theo had held her hand the entire drive back to her apartment, but the silence between them was deafening. "They're testing me," she finally said, breaking the tension. Theo exhaled heavily, his grip tightening on the wheel. "They think they're protecting me." "From what?" she asked, already knowing the answer. He hesitated, his fingers tapping in uneven rhythm against the leather steering wheel. "From being used." Amelia felt something in her chest constrict. "Do you believe that?" He immediately shook his head. "No. But my family, they don't trust easily." She turned her face away, staring out the window at the blurred city lights. "Trust? That wasn't it." They weren't testing her integrity, they were setting her up to fail. And something told her they had only just begun. The next few weeks were a carefully orchestrated assault. Amelia was invited to Whitmore gatherings under the guise of inclusion, but each event felt like a battlefield. Cecilia and Theodore Sr. would ask pointed questions, always phrased politely but dripping with condescension. "So, Amelia dear," Cecilia cooed during a garden luncheon, her voice laced with false warmth, "do you plan to continue working once you and Theo settle down?" Amelia took a sip of her tea, maintaining a composed smile. "Of course. My work is important to me." Cecilia hummed as if considering her words. "How modern of you. You do realize that being part of this family comes with certain expectations, don't you?" Across the table, Theo stiffened. "Mum, stop." "Oh, darling, I'm just preparing her," Cecilia said, flashing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "The Whitmore name carries weight. We wouldn't want any unnecessary distractions now, would we?" Amelia's nails dug into her palm beneath the table. She knew what Cecilia was really saying. She was a distraction. An inconvenience. A phase Theo would eventually outgrow. But the real blow came when she received the envelope. It arrived one evening, slipped under her apartment door. The moment she saw the elegant cursive on the front, her stomach twisted. Inside, a set of photographs. Blurry but clear enough. Images of her sitting in a cafe with an old friend, a man she had once dated briefly years ago. She could barely remember what they had talked about that day, but that didn't matter now. Someone had captured the moment, twisted it into something sinister. And then there was the note. "Are you sure you're in this for love? Because we're not." Her breath hitched as she read the words over and over. Someone was watching her. Manipulating her. Setting her up. Theo found her sitting on the couch, gripping the photographs, her face pale. "Amelia, what is it?" She handed them to him without a word, watching as his face darkened. "Where did you get these?" he demanded, his voice sharp. "Someone slipped them under my door." His hands clenched around the edges of the pictures. "This is ridiculous. You don't think?" "I don't know what to think," she admitted. "But I know one thing, your family doesn't want me here." Theo cursed under his breath, running a hand through his hair. "This is exactly what they do. They find ways to make people leave." She swallowed hard. "And has it ever worked before?" His silence was all the answer she needed. She looked at him, then really looked at him. The love in his eyes was real, but so was the weight of his family's expectations pressing down on him. Would he fight for her, or would he crumble under their influence? She wasn't sure she wanted to find out. But she was about to. Amelia barely slept that night. The photographs haunted her, each one a carefully crafted weapon designed to cut deep. Someone had gone through the trouble of following her, capturing those moments, twisting them into something they weren't. And the message? That was a warning. By morning she had made up her mind. She wasn't going to let Cecilia or anyone else manipulate her into running away. If they wanted her gone, they were going to have to do a lot more than send anonymous threats. But Amelia underestimated just how far the Whitmores were willing to go. That evening, Theo invited her to another family dinner. The tension from the last visit still lingered, but he assured her it would be different this time. "I told them to back off," he said. "They know I'm serious about you." Amelia wanted to believe him, but something in her gut told her the battle wasn't over. When they arrived at the estate, the atmosphere was eerily welcoming. Cecilia greeted her with a warm smile, even placing a hand on Amelia's shoulder as she led her inside. It was unsettling, like walking into the lair of a predator playing nice before the kill. "Amelia dear," Cecilia purred, guiding her to the dining table. "I realized after our last talk that I may have been too forward. It's only because we care deeply for Theo. I hope you understand." Amelia forced a smile. "I appreciate your concern, Mrs. Whitmore. Please call me Cecilia," she said, pouring Amelia a glass of wine. "You're practically family now, aren't you?" Something wasn't right. Cecilia was never this nice. And then, as if on cue, the double doors to the dining room opened, and a familiar face walked in. Marcus. Amelia's heart nearly stopped. Marcus Hale, her ex-boyfriend, the one she had dated before meeting Theo. The very same man in the photographs she had received the night before. "What is he doing here?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Oh, you two know each other?" Cecilia's smile widened, feigning surprise. "How lovely. Marcus is a dear family friend. He and Theo grew up together." Amelia turned to Theo, but his face had gone rigid with disbelief. "Mum, what the hell is this?" "Oh, darling, it's just dinner," Cecilia said, her tone dripping with innocence. "We thought it would be nice for Amelia to catch up with an old friend." Amelia's pulse thundered in her ears. This wasn't a coincidence. Cecilia had planned this. She had orchestrated the entire evening, setting the perfect trap. Marcus, for his part, looked amused. He leaned in, his voice just low enough for only Amelia to hear. "Didn't expect to see me again, did you?" She swallowed hard. "What do you want?" He smirked. "Just here to enjoy a meal. But since we're all being honest, does Theo know why we really broke up?" Amelia felt the blood drain from her face. Marcus wasn't just here to stir the pot, he was here to set it on fire. Theo's gaze snapped to her, searching her face for answers. "What is he talking about?" She opened her mouth to speak, but before she could, Cecilia sighed dramatically. "Oh, Amelia dear, you really should have told Theo the truth." The room felt like it was closing in on her. This was their plan. They wanted to shake Theo's trust in her, to make him doubt everything they had. Marcus leaned back in his chair, taking a sip of wine. "It's funny how secrets have a way of catching up with people, isn't it?" Amelia knew she had walked straight into a game she wasn't prepared to play. And the Whitmores were holding all the cards. Amelia's hands trembled under the table, but she refused to let them see her falter. The tension in the Whitmore dining room was suffocating, each set of eyes locked onto her with predatory curiosity. It wasn't just an ordinary family dinner anymore, it was a trial and she was the accused. Across the table, Marcus took another leisurely sip of his wine, his smirk barely concealed behind the rim of his glass. "Theo," he began, tilting his head slightly as if pondering his next words, "I'm just a little surprised. I mean, it's not every day that you find out your girlfriend has a history with one of your family's closest business partners." Amelia stiffened. He was baiting Theo, twisting the narrative in a way that made her look like she had something to hide. She clenched her fists beneath the table, her nails digging into her palms. She had to tread carefully. "Theo," she started, keeping her voice calm but firm, "Marcus and I dated years ago. It was nothing serious, and it ended before I even met you." Marcus let out a soft chuckle, swirling the wine in his glass. "Is that what we're calling it now? Nothing serious?" Theo turned to Amelia, his face unreadable. "Why didn't you ever mention him?" Cecilia, playing the role of the gracious host, sighed dramatically. "Oh, darling, surely you can understand why she wouldn't. Marcus isn't just some forgotten ex. Their breakup was rather scandalous." Amelia clenched her jaw. "That's enough." Cecilia ignored her. Marcus was devastated. "Weren't you, dear?" Marcus tilted his head, lips curling into a smug smile. "It certainly wasn't my choice to end things." Theo's brows furrowed. "Amelia?" The room fell into silence, all eyes on her. This was it. Cecilia wanted to force her into a corner, make her look guilty, untrustworthy. But Amelia wasn't about to let her win. She inhaled sharply. "Yes, I broke up with Marcus. And yes, it wasn't mutual." Her voice hardened. "Because I found out he was seeing someone else behind my back." A tense stillness settled over the room. Cecilia's eyes flickered with something, Annoyance, perhaps? She hadn't expected Amelia to fight back. Marcus, however, recovered quickly, flashing an easy grin. Come on, Amelia. That's a bit dramatic, don't you think? She arched a brow. Am I lying? For the first time, Marcus hesitated. And in that moment, Theo saw it, the slight falter, the crack in Marcus's polished demeanor. Theo leaned forward, voice low. So, you were cheating? Marcus scoffed, shaking his head. It wasn't like that. Cecilia, realizing her plan was unraveling, quickly interjected. This isn't about Marcus's past mistakes. It's about trust, Theo. And the fact that Amelia kept this from you. Theo ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident. He turned to Amelia, searching for something, reassurance, perhaps. Why didn't you tell me? Amelia exhaled, holding his gaze. Because it didn't matter. Marcus wasn't important. You are. Silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken emotions. Then a slow, deliberate clap echoed through the room. All heads turned to the doorway where a tall, imposing figure stood. Gerald Whitmore, Theo's father, observed the scene with mild amusement. What an interesting dinner conversation, he mused, stepping forward. His sharp eyes landed on Amelia. And here I thought tonight was just about a friendly meal. Cecilia's posture stiffened, but she masked it quickly with a polite smile. Gerald, darling, we were just getting to know Amelia better. Oh, I can see that. His gaze shifted between Marcus and Theo. But from the looks of it, it seems you were more interested in testing her than welcoming her. Theo straightened. Dad. Gerald held up a hand. Enough. Then, with a small, knowing smile, he turned back to Amelia. Tell me, dear, are you always this composed when people try to rattle you? Amelia met his gaze, refusing to back down. I've had practice. A beat passed before Gerald chuckled, shaking his head. Well then, this is going to be very interesting. Cecilia's smile wavered, but she said nothing. Whatever game she had started, Gerald had just changed the rules. Amelia wasn't sure if that was a good thing or not. As the evening drew to a close, Amelia couldn't shake the feeling that she had only survived the first of many battles. Cecilia wasn't done with her, not by a long shot. And Marcus? He had revealed just enough to make her wary. Theo reached for her hand as they stepped outside. Are you okay? She forced a smile. I will be. But as they drove away from the Whitmore estate, Amelia knew one thing for certain. This war had only just begun. The night air outside the Whitmore estate was crisp, but Amelia felt suffocated, like an unseen force was pressing down on her. The ride home was silent, too silent. Theo's fingers drummed against the steering wheel, his jaw set tight. Amelia stole a glance at him. Say something. Theo exhaled sharply. I don't know what to think, Amelia. Her heart clenched. About what? The fact that your mother and Marcus set me up tonight? Or the fact that your family sees me as some sort of imposter? He shook his head, gripping the wheel tighter. No. About the fact that you never told me about Marcus. She closed her eyes for a moment. I didn't tell you because it didn't matter. Marcus is my past. You're my future. Theo let out a humorless laugh. Well, clearly it mattered to someone. Enough to throw it in my face in front of everyone. The weight of the evening pressed down on her. She reached for his hand, but he pulled away. That hurt more than anything. Theo, please? He didn't respond. The rest of the ride was shrouded in silence, and when they reached her apartment, Theo barely met her eyes as he muttered, I need some time to think. Amelia's chest tightened as she watched him drive away. The evening had gone worse than she could have ever imagined, and she had a sinking feeling that Cecilia wasn't done yet. The next morning, Amelia's phone buzzed with an unknown number. She hesitated before answering. Hello. A smooth, familiar voice hummed through the receiver. Amelia, darling. Did you sleep well? Cecilia. Amelia gripped the phone tighter. What do you want? Oh, don't be so defensive. I just wanted to check in after last night. It was quite the spectacle, wasn't it? Amelia clenched her teeth. You set me up. Cecilia laughed softly. Set you up? Oh, sweetheart, you wound me. I simply wanted to test how well you fit into our family. And well, you didn't do too well, did you? Amelia's grip on the phone turned her knuckles white. I'm not playing your games. Oh, but you are, Cecilia said smoothly. You see, my dear, love alone isn't enough to be part of this family. Power, influence, reputation, those are the real currencies here. And let's be honest, you don't have any of them. Amelia swallowed the lump in her throat. You can't control who Theo loves. Cecilia sighed as if she found Amelia's words utterly naive. I don't have to control him. I just have to make him doubt you. A shiver ran down Amelia's spine. You're wasting your time, Cecilia. Theo loves me. There was a pause, then a low, knowing chuckle. Does he? And with that, the line went dead. Amelia stared at her phone, her heart hammering against her ribs. Cecilia wasn't just trying to push her away, she was trying to dismantle her relationship from the inside. And worse, she was succeeding. Over the next few days, Theo was distant. He still answered her texts, but his replies were clipped. They met for coffee once, but the warmth that had once filled their conversations was gone. It was as if a wall had been built between them, one brick at a time, and Amelia knew exactly who had laid the foundation. Then another message arrived. Another unknown number. This time it wasn't Cecilia. Meet me at the Whitmore estate. Tonight. 9 p.m. We need to talk. No name. No explanation. Just an address that she already knew too well. Her instincts screamed at her to ignore it. But she couldn't. Not when her entire relationship was crumbling. Not when Cecilia was pulling strings behind the scenes. At exactly 9 p.m., Amelia stood outside the Whitmore estate, the grand house looming over her like a beast in the dark. The air was heavy with tension as she stepped forward, her fingers curling into fists to keep herself steady. The front door was already ajar. She hesitated. Every nerve in her body told her to turn around, but she pushed forward, stepping inside. The house was eerily silent, the chandeliers casting long shadows against the polished marble floors. Then a voice from the darkness. I was hoping you'd come. Amelia's breath caught as Gerald Whitmore stepped into view. He looked calm, too calm. She narrowed her eyes. You sent the message? He gave a slow nod. We need to talk about Cecilia. Her stomach twisted. What about her? Gerald sighed, running a hand through his silver hair. You don't understand the kind of woman you're dealing with. Amelia crossed her arms. Oh, I think I do. Gerald gave a humorless chuckle. No, Amelia. You don't. He stepped closer, his voice lowering. Cecilia doesn't just push people out of this family. She destroys them. A chill ran down Amelia's spine. What are you saying? Gerald's face darkened. I'm saying if you stay, you won't just lose Theo. You'll lose everything. Amelia's heart pounded. Are you threatening me? Gerald held her gaze for a long moment before shaking his head. No, my dear. I'm warning you. And then, without another word, he turned and walked away, leaving Amelia standing alone in the vast, empty estate. Somewhere in the distance, a clock chimed. The sound echoed through the silent halls like a countdown. Amelia had thought she was fighting Cecilia. But now she wasn't so sure. Because if Gerald was warning her, it meant something far worse was coming. Amelia sat in her apartment, the dim glow of the city outside casting eerie shadows across the walls. Her fingers trembled as she traced the edge of the envelope she had received earlier that evening. Another anonymous message. Another veiled threat. Are you sure you're in this for love? Because we're not. The words burned into her mind, circling like vultures. Someone was watching her. Someone wanted her gone. Her phone buzzed. It was Theo. Hey, love. His voice was soft, reassuring, but she could hear the edge of tension beneath it. Everything okay? Amelia hesitated. She wanted to tell him. She wanted to show him the photographs, the cruel note. But something held her back. Would he believe her? Or would he think she was being paranoid? I'm fine, she lied. There was a pause on the other end. Then, listen, I need to see you. Can you come over? She exhaled. Yeah, I'll be there soon. Theo's family estate loomed in the darkness as Amelia pulled up in her car. The grand house, once awe-inspiring, now felt like a fortress. A place where secrets were buried deep beneath marble floors. As she stepped inside, she immediately felt the shift in energy. Something was wrong. The air was thick with tension. The grand chandelier overhead flickered slightly, casting distorted shadows on the opulent walls. Theo met her at the doorway, his expression serious. Come with me, he said, grabbing her hand. He led her to the study, where Cecilia and Gerald were waiting. Cecilia sat poised, a glass of wine in hand, while Gerald leaned against the fireplace, his gaze piercing. We need to talk, Cecilia began, her voice silk and venom intertwined. About your future with my son. Amelia's stomach twisted. She had been expecting this moment, but not so soon. Not like this. I don't see why that concerns you, she replied, keeping her voice even. Gerald let out a dark chuckle. You're clever, I'll give you that. But you're playing a dangerous game, my dear. Theo stepped forward. Enough. Whatever this is, it stops now. Cecilia sighed dramatically, swirling her wine. Oh, Theo, darling. You're so naive. We're only looking out for you. Amelia clenched her fists. By threatening me? By sending anonymous notes. Cecilia arched a brow, feigning innocence. Notes? I have no idea what you're talking about. Amelia's heart pounded. Either she was lying or there was someone else pulling the strings. Someone even more dangerous. Gerald stepped closer, lowering his voice. You have no idea what kind of family you're dealing with, Amelia? She met his gaze, refusing to back down. Then why don't you enlighten me? Silence stretched between them. Then Gerald smirked, a cruel gleam in his eyes. You'll find out soon enough. A chill ran down Amelia's spine. This wasn't just about disapproval. This was about power. Control. And she was standing in the middle of a war she never saw coming. And worst of all, she was completely alone. Amelia barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, Gerald's warning echoed in her mind. You have no idea what kind of family you're dealing with. The words wrapped around her like a vice, squeezing the air from her lungs. She knew the Whitmores didn't approve of her, but this was something else. Something darker. And if she was going to survive this, she needed to find out exactly what they were hiding. By morning, she had made her decision. She needed answers. Theo was still asleep when she left the house, careful not to wake him. She had spent the night at his place, but after the confrontation with his parents, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. The estate had too many eyes, too many secrets. She drove straight to the only person who might have a clue about the Whitmore family's past, Avery Calloway, an old friend who had once worked for them. If anyone knew what skeletons were buried in their closet, it was Avery. The cafe was nearly empty when she arrived. Avery was already there, nursing a cup of black coffee, his fingers tapping anxiously against the table. He looked up as she slid into the seat across from him, his expression unreadable. I was wondering when you'd come to me, he said, voice low. Amelia frowned. You knew. Avery sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. Everyone who gets close to that family eventually does. A chill ran down her spine. What do you mean? He leaned forward, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. Gerald Whitmore isn't just some controlling father. He's dangerous. The kind of man who doesn't just make problems disappear. He erases them. Amelia's stomach turned. Are you saying? I'm saying be careful. There are things about that family you don't know, Amelia. Things that could ruin you. A bead of sweat trickled down her back. She wanted to push for more, but Avery's eyes darted toward the window, his expression suddenly panicked. Damn it, he muttered. We're being watched. Amelia's pulse skyrocketed. She turned slightly, her breath hitching as she caught sight of a black car parked across the street. The same car she had noticed outside her apartment the night before. Her hands curled into fists. What do I do? Avery's gaze darkened. You need to leave. Now. Amelia's heart pounded as she grabbed her bag. But as she stood to leave, Avery's hand shot out, gripping her wrist. Listen to me, he said urgently. They won't stop until they break you. Or worse. She swallowed hard, fear curling around her ribs like a steel trap. She had been right. This wasn't just about disapproval. This was a warning. And the next time it might not just be a threat. Amelia's hands trembled as she gripped the steering wheel, her heart hammering against her ribs. The black car was still behind her, a shadow in her rearview mirror. Every turn she made, it followed, silent, menacing, patient. She pressed harder on the accelerator. This wasn't paranoia anymore. Someone was watching her, tracking her movements, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. But she wouldn't let them. She took a sharp turn onto a side street and pulled into a dimly lit alleyway, cutting the engine. Her breath came fast and shallow as she waited, gripping the keys so tightly they dug into her palm. Moments later, the black car cruised past the alley, slowing just enough for her to see the silhouette of the driver. A cold wave of dread washed over her. She knew that face. It was Celeste. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. Theo's sister. The woman who had made it clear from the beginning that Amelia didn't belong in their world. She wasn't just sabotaging Amelia's relationship, she was actively hunting her. Amelia's phone buzzed, jolting her from her thoughts. A message from an unknown number. Did you really think you could outrun us? Her stomach twisted. She shoved the phone into her bag and forced herself to think. She needed a plan. She needed to fight back. There was only one person who could help her now. Theo was waiting for her at his apartment, pacing restlessly when she burst through the door. He turned, his expression shifting from frustration to alarm when he saw her pale face. What the hell happened? He demanded, closing the distance between them. You look like you've seen a ghost. Amelia grabbed his hands, her voice urgent. Theo, I need you to be honest with me. Right now. His brows furrowed. About what? Your family. She swallowed hard, her nails digging into his skin. What are they hiding? What is Celeste capable of? Theo tensed, pulling back slightly. Why are you asking me this? Because she's following me. Her voice cracked, her emotions threatening to spill over. She sent me a message. She's trying to scare me or worse. Theo exhaled sharply, dragging a hand through his hair. Damn it, he muttered under his breath. I told them to back off. Amelia's blood ran cold. You knew. I knew they didn't trust you, he admitted, guilt flashing in his eyes. But I didn't think, he stopped himself, jaw clenching. I didn't think Celeste would take it this far. Anger bubbled inside her. And yet here we are. Theo took a deep breath. Look, I'll fix this. I'll talk to her, to my parents. No, Amelia's voice was firm. I don't need you to talk. I need you to pick a side. Silence stretched between them. Theo stared at her, torn between the family he had always known and the woman he claimed to love. And in that moment, Amelia realized something chilling. She was fighting this battle alone. Amelia didn't sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, Celeste's shadow loomed in the darkness, watching, waiting. She could still see the black car trailing her, hear the silent threat in the text message. The walls of Theo's apartment felt like they were closing in, suffocating her. By morning she had made a decision. She wasn't going to be a victim. She was going to fight back. She sat at the kitchen counter, phone in hand, scrolling through old messages from Theo's parents. Every carefully worded dinner invitation, every backhanded compliment from Cecilia, every veiled warning from Mr. Whitmore, it all felt different now. More sinister. There were patterns she hadn't noticed before, subtle manipulations disguised as concern. They had been testing her from the very beginning. Theo emerged from the bedroom, looking exhausted. Amelia, please. You need to let me handle this. She turned to him, her voice calm but sharp. And what exactly will you do, Theo? Ask them nicely to stop ruining my life. His jaw tightened. They're my family. And I'm supposed to be the woman you love. She stood, crossing the room until she was inches from him. But every time they push, you hesitate. I don't want to lose you, he admitted. But I don't know how to go against them. She searched his face for the man she had fallen in love with, the one who had fought for her in the beginning. But he was slipping away, caught in the tangled threads of loyalty and fear. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed again. Another message from the unknown number. Time's up. Meet me at the Whitmore estate. Alone. Her breath hitched. She turned the screen toward Theo, waiting for his reaction. He paled. No. Absolutely not. I don't have a choice, she said. This isn't just about me anymore. They won't stop until I walk away. Theo gritted his teeth. Then maybe you should. The words hit her like a slap. A cold, sinking feeling settled in her stomach as she took a step back. Is that what you want? He ran a hand down his face. No. But if it means keeping you safe. Safe from your own family? A bitter laugh escaped her lips. She had fought so hard to belong in Theo's world, but now, standing in the middle of his apartment, she realized she never truly would. And maybe she never should have tried. She turned on her heel, grabbing her coat. I'm going, she said, her voice steady. And if you're not with me, then I guess I have my answer. She didn't wait for his reply. The Whitmore estate loomed before her, its grand facade as cold and unyielding as the family inside. Amelia took a deep breath and stepped through the gates. The weight of unseen eyes pressed against her as she walked up the stone path. The door opened before she could knock. Celeste stood in the doorway, a slow, knowing smile spreading across her lips. You finally stopped running? Amelia squared her shoulders. I'm not here to run. I'm here to end this. Celeste's eyes gleamed with something almost like amusement. She stepped aside, gesturing Amelia inside. Then let's see if you're ready for the truth. Amelia stepped into the grand Whitmore estate, her pulse pounding like a war drum. The heavy door shut behind her with an ominous finality, sealing her in. The dim glow of the chandeliers cast eerie shadows across the marble floors, and the air was thick with unspoken truths. Celeste led her through the hallway, her heels clicking against the floor like a countdown to something inevitable. I have to admit, Celeste mused, her voice laced with amusement, I didn't think you'd come. Amelia's gaze remained steady. I came for the truth. Celeste let out a soft chuckle. Oh darling. The truth is a dangerous thing. She pushed open the door to the Whitmore study. Inside, Cecilia and Mr. Whitmore sat in leather armchairs, glasses of wine in hand, as if this were nothing more than a casual family gathering. Theo stood near the fireplace, his face pale, his eyes pleading with Amelia not to be here. "I see you received our invitation," Cecilia said smoothly. "Please sit." Amelia didn't move. "Enough with the games. What do you want?" Mr. Whitmore leaned forward, studying her as if she were an insect under a microscope. "It's not about what we want, my dear. It's about what you need to understand." Celeste perched on the edge of the desk, crossing her legs. "Tell me, Amelia, how well do you really know Theo?" Amelia's stomach twisted. "What are you talking about?" Cecilia took a slow sip of her wine, her expression unreadable. "Do you truly believe Theo brought you into his life by accident?" Silence. Theo flinched. His lips parted as if to protest, but no words came out. Amelia turned to him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Theo?" Celeste smirked. "Oh, he didn't tell you, did he? You were never supposed to last this long. You were just a test." A suffocating weight pressed against Amelia's chest. "A test." Theo finally spoke, his voice raw with guilt. "It's not what you think." Mr. Whitmore set his glass down with a quiet clink. "We knew you'd come along eventually. A woman with no wealth, no family connections, no standing. Someone who would try to reach beyond their place." Amelia's head spun. "You planned this?" Celeste nodded, her expression wickedly triumphant. "Theo needed to understand the kind of women who only see him as a ticket to fortune. We wanted to see how long it would take before you showed your true colors." Amelia's vision blurred with fury. "I never wanted anything from him but love." Cecilia tilted her head. "That's what they all say." Theo surged forward, desperation in his eyes. "I swear, Amelia, it was never real to them, but it became real to me. I love you." But the damage had been done. The betrayal slashed through Amelia like a knife. Every whispered doubt, every cruel look from his family, it had all been part of their twisted game. And Theo had let them play it. Her throat tightened. And what was supposed to happen? You'd break my heart and they'd prove their point? Theo swallowed hard. "I never meant for this to go so far." She took a step back. "But it did." Celeste leaned in, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. "So, tell us, Amelia. Now that you know the truth, what will you do?" The room was silent. Every eye was on her, waiting, expecting her to break. Instead, Amelia straightened her shoulders. A slow, knowing smile spread across her lips. "Oh, Celeste," she murmured. "You think you've won." Celeste's smirk faltered. Amelia pulled out her phone and turned the screen towards them. The red light of a recording app blinked back at them. "Every single word," Amelia whispered. "Recorded." A beat of silence. Then chaos. Cecilia shot to her feet. "You little?" Mr. Whitmore's face turned a furious shade of red. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Amelia's pulse thundered, but she held her ground. "Exposed you." Celeste's eyes darkened. "You wouldn't dare." Amelia lifted her chin. "Watch me." Theo reached for her, but she stepped back. "Don't," she whispered, her heart breaking one final time. She turned on her heel and walked out of the Whitmore estate, her head high, her spine unbreakable. Behind her, the walls of their deception crumbled. And for the first time, Amelia was truly free. The end. Betrayal often comes from those who claim to love and protect us. But true strength lies in knowing our worth and walking away from those who seek to diminish it. Amelia's story is a powerful reminder that love should never be conditional, and respect must be mutual. When faced with manipulation and deceit, the greatest act of defiance is standing firm in your truth and refusing to be controlled. Have you ever been in a situation where you felt tested or deceived by those around you? How did you handle it? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments. And if this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more captivating tales. Thank you for reading.